Hi, welcome to Best in Tesla. So Volkswagen want to produce a lot of EVs, especially here in Europe, because if they don't, they will get a lot of penalties. With the size that Volkswagen had in 2020, it is estimated that Volkswagen would save about $21,000 for every EV they sold in penalties. So every single car counts. Even if Volkswagen had to sell the ID.3 with a couple of $1,000 loss, it doesn't matter because they would save $21,000 by getting it on the streets of Europe. So that of course begs the question, did Volkswagen release the ID.3 early to save billions of dollars in penalties, knowing the car was not ready? Because what people might not know is that Volkswagen have had a lot of problems with the ID.3s, especially the ID.3 First, their first pre-order edition. And not just buggy software, there were so many problems that Volkswagen were forced to take many of the cars back, just like this man experienced and explained to Danish national TV. Yes, it does become more and more obvious that Volkswagen is constantly bending the rules to make it look like everything is a-okay. But their bluff is about to be called. And then what? Well, let's take a look at these problems that Volkswagen is having and let's dive right in. So, as I said, Volkswagen would lose about $21,000 for every EV they did not sell in 2020, so they were in a hurry to get as many ID.3s out the door to customers at the end of 2020 to not get billions of dollars in penalties. So did Volkswagen release the ID.3 too early, just to dodge some penalties, knowing that the car was not ready? Well, it kinda seems like it, because as former CEO of Volkswagen Denmark said to DR, our national TV station, "We have never launched a product where we had been so plagued by errors on the first shipment." And according to Volkswagen Denmark, about 7% of all of the first IDs were so bad that they had to get new car parts to fix the problem the owners found. Volkswagen did save about $1.25 billion in penalty because they got those 56,000 ID.3s on the streets in Europe at the end of 2020. So it's hard not to think they put the ID.3 on the streets only to save the $1.2 billion, right? Even though they knew the car was not fully done, because the car was clearly not done yet, and it could not do the over-the-air update as they promised as well, but there was just so many other problems with the cars, like this man from Denmark explained to our national TV station. He tried to count how many errors he got in 14 days, and every single day except one, there was something wrong with the car. Then the trunk wouldn't open, then the car would not go into gear, then the car locked itself, then the screen went black, then it froze. Many times when he backed out, the car speaker would make a weird popping sound. It even prevented his family from going on a 3-week holiday to Germany, because when they were ready to go, the car couldn't start. So they had to stay home while their ID.3 went on holiday to the repair shop for 4 weeks. So after a lot of discussion with Volkswagen, they finally decided to take the car back in May 2021. So as you can see, it's not small things. We are not talking about just a little software bug or two here and there in the software on the screen. No, the ID.3 makes it look like Volkswagen have never tried to make a car before. And Volkswagen did make the first customers of the ID.3s sign a paper that the ID.3 had some shortcomings that would be solved in a software update in the new year. So clearly they knew they didn't have a finished product here, but had to launch it anyway. And the launch of the ID.3 and the big end of the year push did save Volkswagen $1.25 billion. So it did make the year of 2022 look better for Volkswagen than if they didn't push it out. And as you can see from this example, in Norway the ID3 flew off the line and sold over 7,000 units in 2020, with only 5 months of sales. But do keep in mind that 35% of those sales in Europe of the ID3 were just to dealers, not customers. And normally OEM sells about 15-20% to their dealers to make sure they have all the cars they need, so this 35% was a bit over the top compared to how it's normally done, again making it look like Volkswagen is really trying to make the penalties as small as possible by bending the rules a bit. But as we can see, the sales dropped off a cliff in 2021 and has only sold a little over 3,000 units in Norway year to date, with only about 2 weeks left of the year. Well, why is that? Probably many reasons, but one could be thousands of ID3 owners talking bad about their experience, so bad in fact that they made Volkswagen take back their car. Other things could of course be that Volkswagen didn't have to push a lot of them out anymore because we had a brand new year and they had 12 months to sell EVs again. And now they had the new ID4 ready to go on sales for the most of the year. So as we can see, it is clearly taking over the ID3 sales volume in Norway this year for the Volkswagen brand. And of course the Volkswagen Group has a lot more models out this year to help the sales numbers. So they are not pushing the sales of the ID3 anymore, maybe because they have experienced so many problems with the car as well. And as we talked about in the beginning of the year, there were a lot of used ID3 sales in Europe, not just from dealerships that had to buy them from Volkswagen, but also from customers that want to sell their ID3s already after a couple of months or half a year of ownership. In many countries in Europe, it was like 50% of what was sold in the country was suddenly on the used car market. So either they made a really bad car customers didn't want to keep, which they kinda did, or they sold too much to their dealerships that can't or won't sell them, which they also kinda did. So it does really look like Volkswagen rushed this car to market, even though they started production in November 2019 and first started deliveries in September 2020. But that was not enough time for Volkswagen to get the car to work properly, but sold it anyway. And it's not like Volkswagen don't know how to make cars. The Volkswagen brand has been making cars for over 84 years, so for longer than most of you guys watching has been alive, and has become very good at it. But ICE cars. But when they try to make an EV, they stumble. Volkswagen is a great example of just how different it is of making an EV compared to an ICE car. It's not the same thing as many of the short sellers thought, and it's not like the EV is more complex. It is the ICE car that is the complex one, but EVs is controlled by software and batteries, something the legacy automakers know nothing about, and the ID3 shows exactly that. It was a car that was rushed to market, not because Volkswagen wanted to become more green, but because they didn't want to pay the CO2 penalties of not making enough zero-emission vehicles and still making too many ICE cars. But even though they say they will catch up to Tesla, 2021 is showing that is just not the case. Volkswagen is still not focusing on making enough zero-emission vehicles. They are still coming out with a lot of new ICE vehicles and opening new ICE facilities in Africa and South America. That is unfortunately where their focus is. So once again, they are stumbling to get to their CO2 emission targets because they make so many polluting ICE cars compared to their zero-emission vehicles. But the chip shortage. Yes, well, if they focused on their EVs instead of their ICE cars, they would be able to make more EVs, but they choose to shut down the EV production line to keep as many of their ICE production line going. But then they will lose profit, yes, but at the end they will just lose. And therefore, Volkswagen here in 2021 has got help from the Chinese. MG, SAC Motors Europe, NIO, XPeng, Geely are all going into the Volkswagen CO2 pool here in Europe. Otherwise, they will probably not be able to make it this year again. Yes, they did save themselves for $1.25 billion in penalty last year, but they still didn't make it. They still got a 121 million euros in penalties in 2020. So this year, they probably can't pump out any more EVs that they are already doing. Therefore, they are getting help from pure EV companies from China. So they don't want to make too much of a splash about this in the EV world by buying CO2 credits from Tesla. So they do it from the Chinese EV competition instead, hoping no one will make too much notice of it. So it shows that Volkswagen still can't keep up with the EU emission law, because they are still focusing on the ICE sales, even though they say they are all in on EVs. Yes, my trust in Volkswagen is getting smaller and smaller as time goes by, because they constantly keep doing things that don't seem right. The Dieselgate, they lied and cheated. The sales numbers in 2020 of the ID.3 were kind of falsely high, and they put out EVs on the road that was not done yet, even though they knew it. And they continue to talk the talk, but not really walk the walk. They only came out with EVs in Europe because they have to. And that is why their sales are pretty high here in Europe. But go to China or the US and their sales are, funny enough, very small compared to Europe, and have only a target of 50% EV sales in the US and China by 2030. But in Europe, they are proclaiming they have a target of 70%. Yes, because you are forced to do so, or else you would not sell anything in Europe at that time. So they are not doing it on a global scale, only where they have to. So even though they say they will catch up with Tesla, well, we can clearly see that is not the case. Volkswagen will probably end the year off with something like 430,000 BEVs sold in 2021. Tesla will probably end the year off with something like 900,000 BEVs in 2021. So Tesla grew from 500,000 to 900,000 in 1 year. So grew about 400,000 without opening any new factories. And the Volkswagen Group grew from 231,000 to 430,000, so grew about 200,000 in 2021. So Tesla grew with twice as many units than the Volkswagen Group. Not the brand. We are comparing a car brand with an entire automotive group consisting of half a dozen car brands, and they still can't keep up. So in the EV poker game of the world, Volkswagen raised their stake another 200,000. But Tesla saw that 200,000 and raised it another 200,000. And Volkswagen had to fold, because they cannot see Tesla's extra 200,000. Yes, Volkswagen didn't gain on Tesla in 2021, they got further behind. They were only about 270,000 behind in 2020, and they are now 450 units behind in 2021. And in 2022, Tesla will turn on 2 new factories that are both bigger, more advanced, and can produce more cars than the other 2. Yeah, there is no catching Tesla Volkswagen, I'm sorry. But all you have to focus on right now is making better EVs, and a lot more of them if you want to survive this switch. Yes, I thought they had a chance a couple of years back because they did talk the talk, but I have a hard time seeing them coming out on the other side of this transition. Remember, Volkswagen also have almost $250 billion in debt. Yeah, they will not be able to bluff themselves through this EV poker game much longer. With a hand of bad EVs that are very low-tech compared to the competition like Tesla or the Chinese that Volkswagen is helping right now, are pumping up their sales numbers by selling more EVs to the dealership than what is normal for a new ramp. At some point, they have to show their hand, and the ID.3, 4, 5 and 6 are simply not going to cut it. Volkswagen really has to show some really big moves in 2022 if this should not become painfully obvious for everyone, even for people that are not keeping up with what's going on in the EV and automotive market. Well, let's see how they do in 2022, because 2021 was definitely not a full house.
And thank you for watching, and until next time, take care out there and be nice.